meeting here this morning during the 16 days of activism against gender based violence, and also coincidentally, almost to the day of the 10-year anniversary of that awful, brutal gang rape and murder on a moving bus in Delhi, in December 2012. So, I wanted to start by asking you what has changed? What has this past decade meant, and what are the changes you've seen?
I would like to begin by making a comment about the 2012 Nirbhaya gang rape. Uh, this country only seems to wake up to reality when they witness an atrocity. Okay, so I would rather describe what happened in 2012 as an atrocity than just a rape. Now, of course, we know it was a gang rape. And what I'm noticing in this country is greater and greater happening of not just rape but gang rapes. One thing that comes to mind is the prevalence of social media and the issue of the easy availability of technology and the phenomenon where people think they can mimic what they have seen on television or on social media. You know, when we see a gang rape, we see brutality, we see atrocity, we see sexual violence. But what they see is an act of valor. I also think that there has been a turning point in the consciousness of the women's movement. There has been a turning point even in the consciousness of women who are raped. One of the unforgettable lines which I have never forgotten, and I actually did a whole poster on it, was what Nirbhaya said when she was in hospital. She said, quote unquote, "I want to live."
I remember that, yeah.
You do. And imagine the contrast from the time when women used to say, "I would like to die of shame because I have been raped." So it's a very major turning point in the consciousness of women who are victims of rape. So, to that extent, that is the contribution of the women's movement.
We have managed to enact some very, very strict laws in this period. You know, we've lowered the age of delinquency, we've increased the age of consent. Would you say that these actions have created problems as well?
We have been arguing that adolescents experiment with their sexuality at that age, 15, 16. When you increase the age of consent to 18, you are criminalizing the youth of this country, the adolescents of this country. And we opposed it when it was being introduced. Nevertheless, the government of the day thought it was a very progressive thing to do. And now our judges are waking up to the reality that we cannot put adolescents behind bars. Increasing punishment does not answer the questions that we are asking today. So, in fact, we did argue when death penalty was being introduced for things like gang rape and repeat offenders, that what you're doing is only ensuring that the victim herself is killed. Because if a person thinks, "I'm going to be given the death penalty," then why should I keep the woman alive? Because after all, she is the only victim to her own rape. So the more you increase the penalty, the more you increase the danger of, one, the victim being done to death, not surviving to tell the tale, and secondly, making it more difficult for judges to convict. We have seen the tendency where instead of convicting for rape, judges convict for murder.
You have as many as 8 states that have laws against love jihad. So, can we first actually comment on that?
I have written extensively about it, but I refuse to use the expression love jihad. This pertains, and ironically, these laws are titled Freedom of Religion Act. They are the converse of freedom of religion. And I think this is yet another way of well, this goes beyond infantilizing people. It enters the realm of everybody in this country is a Hindu. Hinduism is a way of life. Hindutva is something that we need. It's cultural nationalism. It's not about the Constitution of India, and that's a whole different debate. October 2023, the Prevention of Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005 is going to be completing 15 years of its existence. It's perhaps one of the few anti-discrimination laws this country has enacted which applies to private actors. When I say private actors, the intimate partner that we are talking about, be it a husband or be it a live-in partner. What this act does is it defines violence to include economic, psychological, sexual violence. Very often, Indian families are not nuclear, they're joint families, and the violence can extend to the daughter of the house, to the daughter-in-law, undoubtedly, which is, we know about it, but also the mother, and every woman that lives within the framework of what we call the shared household. And mercifully, the Supreme Court of India recently overruled Batra versus Batra, which held that if the household belongs to the mother-in-law or father-in-law, then it is not the shared household of the daughter-in-law. Today, the Supreme Court has said that regardless of ownership, it's just the factum of living in a home which has to be free from violence. As a law, it's an amazing law, but the tragedy is that it has not been state endowed with the necessary infrastructure, and civil society has not been allowed to play a critical role in helping women. Now we have been seeing talk after 2012, by the way, after the Nirbhaya incident, a Nirbhaya fund was created. And we have seen the establishment or the proposed establishment of one-stop crisis centers. Every district is supposed to have one-stop crisis center, but it's obviously not enough. I mean, you could be living very far away from a district headquarters. So there is need. The Nirbhaya fund is not spent. There is unspent money lying in the coffers of the government of India under the name of Nirbhaya. And it was meant for these purposes. It's not being utilized.
Only 14% women who face domestic violence. So 1 in 3 face it, but only 14% of these 1 in 3 will tell anyone about it. Forget about police, they won't even tell family members about it.
See, I think most women do know that there are women's groups, women's organizations, especially in urban centers. They exist in large numbers. And as I told you earlier, the women's movement has made strident advances in that matter. So they would. But I think the problem is really with state-mandated agencies. I mean, notoriously, the police do it. I want to tell you about a case which I dealt with very early, well, about almost 15, 20 years back, where a woman came to court seeking relief from the court. What was she asking for? The only thing she asked for was custody of her child. Now, that's the other issue. They don't walk out of the home because they're afraid of losing custody of the child. And this is partly because the Indian Minority and Guardianship Act till today has on the statute book a provision which says the father is the natural guardian of the child. They're scared, they're worried, and there is a huge tendency in the courts to give custody of the child to the father. Why? He's the earning member. He can look after the child better than you can. Why? Because he has the money. Whereas the mother says, look, I gave this child birth, I brought it up, I'm the one who provides the time, the care, and the affection. It's not about money. All that is often overlooked by me. It keeps them in the matrimonial home. But to come back to this case, you know, she left the home. She left the home and she went back to court repeatedly asking for custody of the child. And she really didn't get it. And believe it or not, of all things in the world, her husband was a dealer in kerosene. This is a true story. And On one of the hearings, the judge said to her, "Why don't you go back to the house and try this out?" And only out of love for her son, she went. The next thing I heard that she had died by being burnt
Oh God.
with kerosene.
Yeah.